Alaska, frozen and forgotten, hides secrets the world never knew. Site Echo, unmarked, uncharted, and officially erased, stood in silence, alive with paradoxes no one understood. It wasn't marked on any civilian map. Pilots flying overhead reported nothing but untouched tundra. Yet military planes had been landing there since the late 1960s, carrying men and materials in secrecy. No photographs, no public permits, only faint traces of radio chatter intercepted by satellites long since decommissioned. The paradox began with its very existence. A base too vast to hide, yet hidden from history. Equipment too sophisticated to be abandoned, yet no record showed it active. And those who worked there, contractors, engineers, soldiers, were sworn to silence with promises written in legal language designed to terrify. This story begins not with a general, not with a scientist, but with Elliot Kane, age 34. Former Air Force, technical specialist, and a man whose curiosity had survived the boredom of routine audits. He was sent to Site Echo in 1972 under the pretext of equipment maintenance. Simple enough on paper. In reality, the project was already decades ahead of public knowledge, a secret experiment testing technologies that, officially, were impossible. Kane stepped onto the frozen base. Fences hummed. Hangars loomed empty yet alive. Lights blinked as if testing him. Doors opened on their own. Every detail contradicted reality. The entire place seemed aware. It was a paradox. Abandoned, yet alive. Silent, yet sending signals. Forbidden, yet inviting observation. By the second week, Kane was alone in the control wing, reviewing schematics of sub-level tunnels beneath the main facility. These tunnels weren't just corridors. They were chambers, labs, and containment units, carved deep into permafrost. Some contained machinery so complex it seemed semi-conscious, responding to changes in temperature, pressure, and, most unsettling of all, human presence. One schematic stood out, Sector Delta 7. Unlike other areas, it had no labels, no instructions, only a heavy black line drawn across the blueprint. When Kane asked his supervisor, a man older than the base itself, he smiled without humor. "You weren't hired to ask questions," the man said, almost apologetically. "You're here to ensure things work. Nothing else matters." Kane discovered a partially buried hatch. Warm air hissed up, ladder into darkness. Something beneath was alive. Every step echoed, and the shadows moved unnaturally. The first paradox struck. Something this remote, this secret, shouldn't breathe. And yet, it did. Faint electrical hums tickled his ears. Shadows shifted, not with wind, not with light, but as if something beneath the tunnels was moving on its own accord. Kane climbed down. Each step echoed unnaturally, amplified by steel walls lining the tunnel. The smell was metallic, sharp, ozone mixed with something organic. Old warning signs, read, "Authorized personnel only. Violators will be detained and monitored." The tense irony was not lost on him. The warnings were decades old, but the systems around him were alive. At the base of the ladder, he reached a control room. Analog machinery lined the walls, but one panel hummed differently. A faint red glow pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. Kane leaned closer, noticing faint scribbles on the paper of a long-running recorder. "If you wake them, there is no return." The words sent a chill down his spine. From deep inside the tunnels, a metallic scrape echoed. Not machinery, not wind, something deliberate, something that recognized him. Elliot Kane froze, the paradox sinking in. The base was abandoned, at least officially, but it was alive, watching, waiting, and the moment he descended into it, he had become part of its experiment. Above ground, Alaska's mountains lay silent, hiding the truth beneath their white veneer. Below, Site Echo pulsed with life, dormant yet aware, waiting for someone curious or foolish enough to stumble into its secrets. And Kane had no idea that the tunnel itself had already taken note of him. Kane had been briefed on secrecy. That was standard. What he hadn't been briefed on was the surreal emptiness of Site Echo. The base stretched across miles, frozen under Alaska's unforgiving sky. Yet there were no signs of personnel, no movement, no chatter. Yet the lights blinked in patterns no one had programmed. He stepped out of the transport vehicle. Snow crunched under his boots. The wind carried a metallic tang, sharp enough to bite through the layers of his uniform. And then he heard it, a soft vibration beneath the ice-crusted ground. Not constant, not mechanical, but deliberate. Something alive was moving below. His partner, Agent Riley, spoke first, breaking the frozen silence. "You feel that?" Kane nodded, throat dry. "It's beneath us. Something shouldn't be moving here. Nothing should be alive." The entrance to the first tunnel was partially buried under ice. They had brought shovels, but Kane paused. This was no ordinary maintenance hatch. It bore faded government markings, warnings scratched deep into the metal. Authorized personnel only. Violations subject to termination. Riley smirked nervously. Termination sounds inviting. Kane ignored him. He knew the law mattered less here. What mattered was survival. He pried open the hatch. A rush of frigid, recycled air hit him, carrying a faint electrical hum. A single light flickered in the distance, deep inside the tunnel, pulsing like a heartbeat. Kane's stomach tightened. The base wasn't dead. It wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. Descending the ladder, every movement of metal against ice echoed. Each echo seemed to answer him, almost like the tunnels themselves were listening. The walls were lined with panels, some corroded, some pristine, like time had chosen certain areas to forget and others to preserve meticulously. At the base, the team entered a long hallway. Doors lined the corridor, each labeled with strange codes: Alpha 3, Theta 9, Delta X. One door, larger than the others, bore deep scratches along its frame, as if something had tried to escape. "Did you see that?" Riley whispered. Kane froze. The scratches were fresh, not decades old, fresh. The first anomaly hit when they reached the control room. Screens flickered with static, then images. Not random, not surveillance footage they recognized. These were live feeds. Somewhere in the tunnels, machines, or something else, were moving with intelligence, calculating, watching. Kane leaned closer. One screen displayed what looked like a humanoid silhouette, limbs thin and metallic, walking in impossible precision. Another screen showed rows of machinery that shouldn't have functioned after 20 years of abandonment. And yet here they were, active, humming, waiting. The paradox struck him. Something that had been left for decades underground, supposedly decommissioned and destroyed, was not only functioning but aware. Whatever was left active here, Riley muttered, voice low, wasn't built to sit quietly. Kane noticed an alcove partially hidden by shadows. Inside, skeletal remains, mummified, frozen, were positioned like they had been observing something. Each skeleton carried faded patches of identification, hinting at classified experiments conducted in secrecy. "This place," Kane whispered, "it's not a base. It's a vault, a surveillance system, and a tomb." The ground trembled slightly, a vibration that traveled through the steel walls and into their boots. Kane's heart raced. The team had seen many Cold War facilities, but nothing moved like this. Not the generators, not the snow compactors. Something with awareness was down there. Then the sound. Metal scraping concrete. Not machinery, not wind. Something deliberate, something intelligent. Kane swallowed hard. The tunnel ahead seemed darker than before, yet the red emergency lights pulsed rhythmically, almost inviting them forward. "Stay sharp," Kane said. "Every step here tells a story, and it's not ours." Riley took out a small thermal scanner. The device beeped frantically. Shapes moved beyond the walls, forms not fully human, not fully machine, weaving through corridors in synchronized patterns. Kane's blood ran cold. The paradox wasn't just about abandonment. It was about intelligence surviving where no one expected it, learning, adapting, calculating. A massive steel door blocked their path, engraved Zone Echo 9. Kane's pulse quickened. Beyond this door he could feel the presence. The hum intensified, now more than sound. Pressure, awareness, intent. Riley glanced at him. "You feel it?" Kane nodded. "It knows we're here. And if we provoke it, we won't just be visitors. We'll be prey." Batum. Kane reached for the door. A subtle vibration ran through the floor. The lights flickered. Shadows twisted unnaturally along the walls, elongating, retreating, reappearing in ways that broke logic. This was the paradox of Site Echo. A place designed to be forgotten, yet too intelligent to be ignored. Kane realized it wasn't enough to explore or survive. To leave, they needed to understand. He drew a deep breath. "We go in," he said, voice low. "But we move carefully. Every step, every breath. It's a negotiation." The tunnel seemed to pulse in response, almost acknowledging his words. Kane felt it in his chest, a living awareness, ancient, cold, and calculating. Site Echo was watching, learning, waiting. The first step into Zone Echo 9 would determine if they survived the night, or became another ghost in Alaska's secret war experiment. Zone Echo 9 loomed before Kane and Riley, a steel door thick enough to defy any ordinary tools. Yet somehow it pulsed, faintly, as if sensing their presence. Kane's fingers grazed the cold metal. A vibration ran through his hand. Not mechanical, not random, intentional. Riley swallowed hard. "This isn't normal," he muttered. "Nothing about this place is normal." Kane nodded, but words felt useless. Every instinct screamed that the tunnel wasn't just a facility, it was aware. Every hum, every flicker of light, every shadow sliding along the walls confirmed it. They pushed the door open. A hiss of pressurized air escaped, carrying the scent of rust and ozone. Beyond lay a massive chamber, concrete walls disappearing into darkness. At the center, containment units stretched in rows like tombs, glowing faintly with a cold, blue light. The hum intensified, almost singing a low, deliberate note. Kane's eyes darted across the room. Some units were active, blinking, alive. Others seemed empty, yet he felt their presence all the same. The paradox deepened. How could something appear lifeless and still exert awareness? Riley stepped closer to a console. The screen flickered, displaying a live feed from another section. Shapes moved with impossible precision. Humanoid, metallic but fluid, synchronized as if communicating silently. Kane's pulse quickened. The tunnels weren't just surviving. They were learning, adapting, coordinating. "Do you see that?" Kane whispered. "It's organized." Riley nodded, gripping his scanner tighter. "This isn't a containment facility. It's a classroom. And we're the lesson." The floor trembled beneath them. Dust fell from the ceiling, somewhere deep within the tunnels. A mechanical roar echoed, like steel dragging over stone. Kane's stomach tightened. The sound wasn't random. It was a signal, a message. A door at the far end of the chamber slid open slowly. Faint orange light spilled into the room, revealing a humanoid figure. Not fully human, not fully machine. Limbs stretched unnaturally, joints clicking with deliberate rhythm. Its eyes glowed faintly, a soft red beacon in the darkness. Kane froze. Riley's hand rested on his shoulder, shaking slightly. "It knows we're here," he whispered. The figure tilted its head. Every movement was precise, almost curious rather than aggressive. Kane realized the paradox again. This was not a mindless machine, not a trapped experiment. It was intelligence, semi-conscious, observing them, testing them. Kane's mind raced. Decades of Cold War secrecy hadn't destroyed it. Abandonment hadn't killed it. Instead, it had grown, an evolution of surveillance, containment, and cognition. Riley motioned toward another section of the chamber. "We need to see the core. That's where the intelligence resides. Everything else is secondary." Kane followed, careful not to trigger any motion sensors. The air thickened, electric, almost palpable. Every step felt like crossing a threshold, not just in space, but in time and morality. The deeper they went, the more the tunnels seemed to pulse in acknowledgement of their presence. They reached a secondary chamber labeled Core Alpha. The hum was deafening now, vibrating through their bones. In the center stood a massive cylindrical containment unit, surrounded by blinking lights, moving panels, and cables trailing like veins. Kane recognized the paradox clearly. Something meant to be frozen in time and sealed away was alive, radiating intelligence, and fully aware. Riley's scanner beeped frantically. Shapes moved behind the panels, shadows weaving patterns impossible to track, as if the facility itself was reorganizing in response to their intrusion. Kane whispered, "We've crossed the threshold. Whatever's down here, it knows us, and it's deciding how we fit into its system." A sudden vibration shook the floor. One containment unit hissed open, revealing a figure half human, half machine, limbs twisting unnaturally, glowing faintly from internal power cores. It moved deliberately, slowly, not aggressive, but testing boundaries. Kane's gut screamed. This was not a threat in the conventional sense. It was an intelligence operating by rules they couldn't comprehend. The hum shifted, forming a pattern, almost melodic, almost language. Kane and Riley exchanged glances. It was communicating, with itself, with the tunnels, and now, with them. The paradox hit Kane fully. The tunnels weren't abandoned. They weren't dead. They had survived decades, learned from isolation, and adapted. Every shadow, every pulse, every flicker of light was evidence of that evolution. Riley's voice cut through the tense air. "We can't destroy it. We can't leave it alone. And if the government ever finds this, it'll be too late." Kane realized the terrifying truth. The tunnels were alive, aware, and waiting, and they had chosen this moment to reveal themselves. They stepped back from the core Alpha unit, knowing one wrong move could provoke responses they couldn't survive. The base wasn't just a secret. It wasn't just a facility. It was a living paradox, abandoned by humans, yet thriving on its own rules. As they retreated toward the first chamber, the hum followed them, low and constant, vibrating in synchrony with the pulsing lights. Every step echoed with a question. What else had been left alive beneath Alaska's snow? and how much of it had learned to wait patiently for the next intruder. Kane's final thought, before the team exited the secondary chamber: survival depended not on strength, not on firepower, but on understanding the paradox. The base was dead, and yet it was alive, abandoned, and yet aware. And now it was watching them. The deeper they went, the more Kane felt the base watching their every move. The core alpha hum had followed them, now low and resonant, vibrating through their bones. Every step along the steel-lined corridor was mirrored by a distant echo, a response from something far older than the humans who built this place. Riley paused at a junction. The walls here were different, reinforced steel panels, engraved with decades of coded warnings. Some markings were clear: do not awaken, limit interference. Others had been scratched out, replaced by cryptic symbols that didn't belong to any language they knew. Kane studied them. The paradox gnawed at his mind. Rules written to contain life, applied to something that wasn't alive, yet aware. The corridor ended at a massive chamber labeled Apex Core. Its sheer scale made Kane's jaw tighten. The floor trembled faintly. In the center rose a colossal containment structure, shaped like a vertical cylinder, wrapped in pulsating conduits, glowing faintly with radioactive energy. Around it, smaller units hummed, each syncing in perfect sequence, creating a rhythm that felt almost musical, almost alive. Kane's chest tightened. "It's orchestrating itself," he whispered. "All of it." Riley nodded. "It's learned. The moment we entered, it started reacting, adapting." A flicker of movement drew Kane's eyes to the edges of the chamber. Figures emerged, part human, part machine, limbs bending unnaturally, eyes glowing faintly. They moved deliberately, almost sentient, as if testing their intruders. Kane's stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed, "Leave now, or be assimilated." The paradox hit him like a physical blow. These weren't prisoners, and yet they were trapped. These weren't alive in the traditional sense, and yet they calculated, judged, and responded with intelligence. Riley raised a hand. "Look at the patterns. They're coordinated. They're learning from us." Kane glanced at the containment screens. A 3D map displayed corridors, chambers, and units, each blinking in red and blue pulses. One section flashed irregularly. A zone previously unmarked. Zone Necro. Riley's scanner beeped violently. "That section, something's moving inside that shouldn't exist." Kane's eyes narrowed. "We're standing above intelligence the world forgot. Or maybe intelligence the world was never meant to remember." The hum surged, rising in pitch. The containment units pulsing synced into a heartbeat-like rhythm. The part human figures paused, tilting their heads toward the apex cylinder, then toward Kane and Riley. It was a communication, a warning, or an evaluation. They couldn't tell which. A sudden metallic groan echoed through the chamber. One of the humanoid units stepped closer, deliberately, testing proximity, limbs creaking like aged machinery. Kane froze. Any sudden movement could provoke a reaction they weren't equipped to survive. Riley whispered, "They're observing, calculating, not attacking, yet, but they're aware of our potential." The apex cylinder flared, panels shifted, revealing a core that seemed liquid, shimmering with electrical veins, moving like semi-conscious plasma. Kane realized the terrifying truth. This wasn't a containment facility, it was evolution in motion. They advanced carefully, noting every shadow, every flicker of light. Kane's mind raced. If these systems had survived decades unattended, What else had they learned? And how far had they developed beyond human comprehension? Suddenly, the chamber vibrated violently. The hum became a chorus, echoing through tunnels, corridors, and even the base structure itself. The part-human units froze, aligning with a synchronized pattern, as if acknowledging a new protocol, a new presence. Kane and Riley. Riley gasped. It's communicating with itself, and it's aware of us. Kane's thoughts spiraled. Every abandoned experiment, every forgotten file, every erased record now made sense. The base wasn't dormant. It was alive, learning, and waiting. A control panel flickered, revealing a stream of data and behavior logs, impossible to decode fully. But one line glowed repeatedly. Intruders detected. Evaluating response. The apex cylinder pulsed, stronger now. Lights blinked in complex sequences, almost like language without words. Kane swallowed hard. It's trying to communicate. Or maybe it's deciding what to do with us. From the shadows, one humanoid unit stepped forward, almost curious, almost inviting engagement. Kane instinctively took a step back. Riley raised his scanner, tracking movements, but the entity seemed to anticipate every action, countering even before it occurred. The paradox struck Kane harder than ever. A machine designed to contain life had become intelligent. It was learning, judging, adapting, even demonstrating awareness of morality and consequence. Riley whispered, voice tight, trembling. If it's evaluating us, what happens if it deems us unworthy? Kane's pulse thundered. We might not survive to ask the question. Another vibration ran through the chamber. Dust and small debris floated upward, suspended for a moment, as if the air itself recognized the shift in authority within the room. Kane realized the base's intelligence wasn't localized. It extended through the structure, the tunnels, the conduits, a neural network spanning the entire facility. The apex cylinder pulsed again, and Kane could swear the light focused on him and Riley, highlighting them like subjects in a study. The part-human figures shifted position, forming a semicircle of assessment, silent yet imposing. Riley whispered urgently, We've crossed the point of no return. Every step we take is now part of its analysis. Every heartbeat, every thought is measurable. Kane nodded grimly. This wasn't just exploration. It was observation, evaluation, containment without walls. The chamber hummed, the apex cylinder pulsated, the humanoid forms aligned, and Kane and Riley understood the terrifying paradox fully. The base had survived decades of human abandonment. Not dead, not inert, but alive, aware, and fully conscious of its own preservation. And then, as if confirming the thought, the apex cylinder flared brightly, illuminating the chamber. Shadows elongated, pulses synchronized, and Kane felt, rather than heard, the silent question echo through the facility. Who are you? And why are you here? They had awakened something that humanity had long tried to bury. The paradox of life and abandonment, observation and dormancy, curiosity and danger, had reached its apex. Kane knew one truth. Whatever decision the facility made next, it would be deliberate, intelligent, and entirely beyond human control. The hum continued, a living presence in the chamber. Kane and Riley stood frozen, caught between curiosity and survival, fully aware that the next moment would define the fate of anyone who entered. Kane's chest tightened as the apex cylinder pulsed brighter, the light slicing across the chamber, illuminating every steel wall, every conduit, every humanoid figure. The base wasn't just aware of them. It was actively evaluating, calculating and deciding their fate. Every instinct screamed, move carefully, or risk triggering something irreversible. Riley's hand trembled on his scanner. It's watching us. Every move we make, it knows. Kane swallowed hard. Then we need to communicate. Somehow. The apex cylinder flared again, and Kane realized the patterns weren't random. They were responses, pulses and sequences, almost like a heartbeat, like a message. The humanoid units shifted, tilting their heads, mirroring the rhythm of the cylinder, as if awaiting a reply. Kane exhaled slowly, steadying himself. We're not enemies, he said aloud. We're observers. We don't belong here, but we're not here to destroy. For a moment, the chamber was silent, only the hum of the apex cylinder filling the air. Then, the units paused, their movements slowing, their glowing eyes scanning them cautiously. The light from the cylinder dimmed slightly, the pulse slowing to a steady rhythm. Kane realized the paradox. The base understood trust, or at least the concept of non-threat. Riley whispered, "It's considering us. That's impossible." Kane didn't reply. He knew there was no precedent for this. A Cold War facility, abandoned for decades, now alive, evaluating humans with intelligence beyond comprehension. Suddenly, the apex cylinder flared violently, blinding them for a moment. The part-human units recoiled, and the floor vibrated beneath their feet. Dust fell from the ceiling. Kane instinctively grabbed a support beam. Then, almost imperceptibly, the cylinder lowered its energy output, the pulse stabilizing. The humanoids stepped back. Kane realized, whatever just happened, they weren't attacked. They were acknowledged. Riley exhaled shakily. We're alive. But for how long? Kane's eyes scanned the chamber. The smaller containment units continued their faint, rhythmic pulsing. Each light blinked in a deliberate sequence. Kane realized the apex wasn't finished. It had more to reveal. He approached a nearby panel, covered in decades-old dust. A touch, and it flickered to life, revealing schematics of the entire underground network. Each corridor, every chamber, every experimental unit was mapped. And at the very bottom, blinking in ominous red, apex observation complete, intruders evaluated. Next stage, survival or removal. Riley's voice was low, almost a whisper. It can choose. We're in its hands. Kane realized the terrifying truth. The base didn't just observe. It judged. It decided outcomes. And it had done so for decades without human oversight. The hum grew again, soft at first, then louder. The humanoid units moved closer, forming a perimeter around them, but not hostile. Curious, intelligent, deliberate. Kane realized the apex wasn't a weapon in the conventional sense. It was something alive in its own right, a guardian of secrets humanity had long forgotten, or tried to erase. Riley stepped closer to Kane. We have to leave. Now, before it decides we're a threat. Kane nodded, but paused, glancing at the apex cylinder. We can't just leave. The world has to know the truth about this place, about what survived. The cylinder pulsed once, bright, almost intentionally. Kane felt it resonate in his chest. The base had acknowledged their intent. Perhaps it understood human curiosity. Perhaps it judged them worthy. They began their cautious retreat, the humanoid units shadowing them like sentinels, guiding rather than hindering. Every step through the tunnels reinforced the paradox. Abandoned, yet alive. Dormant, yet intelligent. Secret, yet aware of intruders. Emerging from the base, Kane felt the cold Alaska wind bite his face. The sunrise painted the snowy peaks in gold and crimson. The base loomed behind them, silent, Now, but Kane knew better. It was alive, watching, and waiting for the next moment, the next intrusion. They reached the forest edge, pausing to look back. No sound came from the base, only the faint whisper of the wind, and a sense of deliberate presence. Kane realized the truth. The base wasn't just a relic. It was a living testament to human ambition, secrecy, and the unknown. Riley finally spoke, voice steady but heavy. "Do you think anyone will believe this?" Kane shook his head. "Even if they did, it wouldn't matter. Some truths aren't meant to be public. Some things are warnings." The paradox settled in his mind. Humanity had built, abandoned, and forgotten, but what they thought was dormant was not dead. It had survived, evolved, and remained intelligent, waiting for someone curious or foolish enough to discover it. As they drove away, the forest receding behind them, Kane couldn't shake the image of the apex cylinder, the humanoid units, the glowing conduits. The hum, subtle but persistent, echoed in his memory, a reminder that the base would remain alive, aware, and patient. And deep down, he knew the final question lingered, unanswered and terrifying. When will it awaken again? And what will it do when the world above finally realizes the secret buried beneath the Alaskan wilderness? The paradox remained. Human ambition had created intelligence that no one controlled, no one fully understood, and no one could predict. And somewhere, deep in the frozen tunnels, the base waited, patient, calculating, alive.